We have all transversed the great internet to answer our inner, deepest, most questions. We have all Googled the meaning of life. We have all watched YouTube to find out what our favorite creators' opinions are on our greatest questions. But now we're going to answer the greatest question and the most asked question in the entirety of the universe's existence. What is Thera? Thera is a two-player trading card game that you can play with anyone, or you could play by yourself if you are lonely, or you just want to practice, because you could always practice by yourself. So to win, you have to deal 10 damage to your opponent, or if they would draw and they have no cards left to draw. So that's pretty much self-explanatory. If they have no cards left in what is called a deck or a song in this game, then they lose if they were to draw. But if they have cards left and they draw and they run out of cards, then as long as they don't continue to draw, they still are allowed to play. And you do this by using a variety of creatures, spells, runes, and traps. You use creatures to attack your opponent and defend each other and yourself. You use spells to add a little bit of tricky little combo plays. You add some spice to your meal. Make your plays unpredictable and yet consistent enough to where it works for you. And then use traps to nullify your opponent's advances on you, or nullify their abilities and protect your creatures from their attacks. And you can use runes to set them on the board and have an everlasting effect on the battlefield as long as they stay there. Now you may be wondering, what is a song? For us, a song is the same as a deck. In one song, you may only have 4 copies of one card with the same card name as itself. For example, as my young friend over here, Crimson Draco Kid, you may only have 4 copies of Crimson Draco Kid in your song, but that does not apply to effects that change their own name. For example, say we had this card right here named Crimson Blade. If it could change its name to Crimson Draco Kid, we would still be able to run both cards in the song at 4 copies because it changed its original name to become that. But if they're both their original names regardless were Crimson Draco Kid, then they would both not be allowed at more than 4 each. More than 4 in total. So that's how that works. In a song, you may only have 50 cards in it, so you must be wise about what you put in there. But when it comes to creature, spell, traps to rune ratios, it just depends how you want to play. Like me personally, I prefer to run about 22 creatures in my song, just because I like to be slightly more aggressive. The spells always help out when they need to. Traps can always help out. And, runes you don't really need that much of. I know that's just my opinion. I do know some people that would put more runes in their song than others would, and that one of those people are me. So it all just comes down to how you want to do it. But just remember to ask yourself whenever you're doing that, what is your song trying to do? What is its main purpose? Does it need more runes than creatures? Does it want more spells than creatures? Etc. And then you may only have 4 safeguards in one song. So, safeguards are things like this right here. My friend, Young Guard Draco Kid, they are essentially instant guards of any kind. And we'll discuss guarding later, but basically, you see his skill right here. All safeguards have this ability, where they have the word safeguard on it to represent that, but then you discard them from your hand to stop one of your opponent's attacks from occurring. That means the attack just doesn't go through, and it's stopped right in its tracks. So that's what safeguard is. They're pretty much nullifies against any attack, so since they're so powerful, obviously it makes sense to have a limit on them. In this case, that limit is 4. And finally, triggers. This is an important factor of Thera. You can only have 10 triggers in one song. It is not mandatory to run triggers. You can choose not to run triggers in Thera, but it is suggested that you run triggers unless you really got a good play in mind. In that case, go for it. How you make your lineup is completely up to you, though, but you can only have 5 heal triggers at most in one song. There are 3 types of triggers. There are heal triggers, draw triggers, and damage triggers. Damage triggers, when they are checked during either a gift check, which we'll also go over later, or a damage check, which we'll also go over later, they will deal 1 damage to your opponent immediately. Basically what that means is, if you get a damage trigger on your 10th damage, your opponent takes the damage. And you don't take your damage until they take theirs. Which basically means if your opponent is at 9 damage, and you get a damage trigger when they put you officially to 10 damage, before this card goes in your damage zone, they have to take a damage. And if they do not see a damage trigger or a heal trigger, they immediately lose the game. If they see a damage trigger, the loop keeps going until one of you doesn't see a damage trigger anymore. As for a heal trigger, as you can assume, they are exactly what they sound like. They get you one free heal regardless of when they're checked as well. So if you have 1 damage, when you were to check a heal trigger during your damage or gift check, you get a free heal out of it, which is really nice. It allows you to go down a bit more damage and allows you to play a little bit less cautiously, considering you have some breathing room now to take some attacks. And finally, draw triggers. They're also exactly what they sound like. You literally just get to get a draw the second you see it, which is really nice. Fills up your hand, and if you get it during a gift check, that's basically 2 free cards to hand. Once more, we will go over all those triggers and the gift check and damage check later. Now, onto what might be the more important thing, summoning. So, summoning creatures, or monsters, or spirits, whatever you want to call them, because they always vary from different games, varies depending on what game you play. For example, games like Yu-Gi-Oh! You are only allowed to summon 1 monster a turn, unless you are playing cards that allow you to special summon like hell, and then you get multiple monsters a turn. And then things like Buddy Fight, where you can summon as much as you want, and things like Vanguard, where you can also summon as much as you want, etc. In this deck, it is you can summon up to 3 creatures a turn normally. We will get over what I mean by that later. So, the max level you can call up to per turn is 3. As you can see from Crimson Draco Kid right here, in the top left corner, there is a level, or the number, and that represents its level. For him, it is clearly that he is a level 1. So, basically what that means, you can summon 3 level 1s each turn because that adds up to 3. You could summon a level 2 and a level 1 each turn because that adds up to 3. Or you could summon a level 3 each turn, once per turn, because that is just a pure 3 of the 3 level. But obviously, you don't have to go up to that level ranking, so if you just want to call 1 level 2, you can. If you want to call 2 level 1s, you can. If you want to call 1 level 1, you can. Or you can just choose not to call anything. Now, special summoning is a special rule that will bypass this, because if a card is special summoned by an effect, it does not count towards your level cost. Basically, what that means is, say for example, I take Crimson Dragon Kid right here. If I were to special summon him on the field, and special summoning is done by abilities, obviously, if I were to special summon him onto the field, his level cost does not count for that turn, which means since he's a level 1, it doesn't matter. So I still have my other 2 level cards that I can summon. So I can take a Hammer Dragon I can take a level 2, and I can take another level 1 and put them on the board, and even though I did get a total of 4 levels on the board that turn, one of those levels does not count towards the overall cost because it was special summoned. And that goes for every card regardless of what level it is, so that's always really nice. So always try to build your deck with a lot of special summoning cards, or a good chunk of them, because that can always help you just advance your field more. But you don't want to take up too many of them because most of them have cost, and you do not want to have to constantly pay cost to get it out of field. Now, how do you start a game of Thera? So first off, to start, you need a song, or a deck of 50 cards, obviously, because otherwise you can't play. So once you're done putting your deck down, you obviously do your shuffle. You let your opponent shuffle your deck in a sign of trust. Then what you do is you draw the top 5 cards of your song, and then you can take cards from your hand that you do not wish to keep and put them on the bottom of your song. So let's just get a starting hand, for example. Let's just do-da! I have a Crimson Draco Kid right here. I have a Hammer Dragon. I have a Dragon Wings. I have a Fire Blast. And I have a damage trigger. I do not want to keep... You typically don't want to keep triggers in hand, so I don't want to keep that damage trigger. And, I don't want that Fire Blast in hand because, as you can see, it says pay 2, and we'll get over what that is later. But for right now, I can't use it, so I don't want to keep this in my hand either. So I'll send this to the bottom as well. And then, because you sent them to the bottom, you get to draw the same amount of cards back. So I get to draw the next 2 cards of my song, and then after that, you shuffle the cards in your song, and then you start the game by any means necessary, maybe flipping a coin, or guessing an even or odd of the other person, etc. Any way you can start the game, that is fine, as long as it's legal. And once that happens, you normally open it up by saying the game phrase, "Knowledge release, Gunba, open!" to acknowledge that you are playing the game. Obviously, you don't have to do that. If you really want to be the meme player and probably get disqualified from tournaments for doing it, I don't know if you would, but if you want to do it, you can. On to turn order of how the game goes. So first up, we have our start phase. That is just the official start of the turn. So like everyone knows, oh, okay, it's his turn, he's starting now. Draw phase. You draw 1 card from the top of your song, and you flip all your damages face up. So in this game, you can pay cost by flipping your damages face down. This allows you to flip them all face up. During your draw phase, which is really nice, you get to draw, and you get to use your cost that you paid last turn again, which is really helpful, and it's a phase you definitely don't want to miss out on. Stand phase. You take all your resting creatures, and you put them into the standing position, allowing them to once more attack again if you rested them before. And main phase, you play and activate any or all spell and runes you like by paying their cost, and summon any amount of creatures you can or like from your hand. So, you can, like I said earlier, you don't have to call all the creatures in your hand that equal up to level 3. You can just choose to keep them all in your hand, or only summon 2 of them because you don't want to show up too much of your hand. Same with spells and runes. If you only wanted to play 1 rune a turn and maybe not use a spell at all that turn because maybe you can't afford it or maybe you just don't want to, feel free to. No one's forcing you to do it. Just do as you like and play to your strategy. The attack phase is pretty much obvious. You attack your opponent with your creatures as you like. So, and to do that, you rest your cards. So standing is in the position that Crimson Draco Kid is up right now, where they're upright. Sideways, which Crimson Draco Kid is now, is how you attack. And then the end phase, you end your turn. So we will go over all those steps more into detail later on. Now, on to what the field looks like. This is what a field looks like. So in the very far back corner, in the very far back and in the very far front, you can see they're identical. Those are the matching fields. The very far back rows on each side, the ones that are facing vertically, the ones that are standing up like Crimson Draco Kid is right now, those are called the spell and rune zones. That is the rune zone, where you place all the cards that would enter your rune zone, such as runes or other later cards that are to be released, that I will not tell you now because that would be counted as spoilers, go there. And, that's just a way to acknowledge that they're on the field. You can only have 5 at a time, so keep track of them. As for the places right in front of them, the ones that are rested, which is the opposite of Crimson Draco Kid at the moment, that would be the creature zone, where you summon all your creatures. Just like the rune zone, there are only 5 slots, so be very mindful of what you use with them, but you can always call over your creatures. I do not suggest you call over your creatures too often, though, unless it's a part of your plan, because, you want to show your creatures a bit of respect, even if they're not real. You want to show them some respect, because you don't want to just get rid of them off the field immediately, and they also came to the board for a reason. Now, if you want to call over them, because maybe your opponent has pushed you into a position where they're no longer needed, get rid of them and call over them with another creature. And then finally, the zone above them is the damage zone, where you put your damage cards. Like when you take damage checks, you put them there. As you can see, it's represented by 10. And then the zone in between that would be the guard zone, where you play down cards that have shields, which, as you can see by Crimson Draco Kid, it being a level 1, has a shield on it in the in the top right-hand corner under the nation symbol, which is opposite to where the level symbol is. So as you can see, on the top right hand, we have the nation symbol, and if it's a level 1, it will always have a shield icon, and if it's level 2 or higher, it will most likely always have a gift icon. I say almost because there are cards that would not have that. For example, Shield Guard Dragon over here, he is a level 3, but he has a shield icon on him. He does not have a gift icon. But level 1s, most of the time, always will have a shield icon right on them, so that means their power, which is at the very bottom. As you can see, there's the number 1. That represents the amount of damage they do on attack, if their attack were to go through. And then on the slash side, we have the big number of 100. That is the amount of power they have. So when you would use a card to guard, that power is added towards the shield value. So it has 100 power in attack, and it has 100 power in guard, which is really nice of a card. Now on to the important part about paying for cards in effect. If we look at Crimson Draco Kid here, his effect states, pay 1 to destroy this creature and choose a creature with Crimson in its card name, and it can deal 2 damage instead of 1 until the end of turn. So that's obviously a very helpful skill. It allows a creature to do more than 1 damage a turn. But you may be wondering, what is pay? Here is how pay works. The damage you take throughout the fight doesn't just keep track of how close you are to losing. It can also be paid for cost. For example, if a card like Crimson Draco Kid over here said pay 1, what that means is you take the equal to number of cards as the number that's printed on the card, for this case it's 1, that are face up in your damage zone, you flip them face down. If it said pay 2, you would flip 2 of your face up damage face down. If it said pay 3, you do 3, etc, etc, etc. So in this case, you flip 1 of your face up damages face down to pay the cost for the skill. And at the beginning of your next turn, that cost will be undone. So basically, it will flip back up if you remember from the draw phase. And that's really nice. That means you can use as many skills as you want as long as you're smart with it. But I do not suggest going all out with that knowledge, as, going all out requires that you are most likely using up all your cards in one go, and if your opponent can make the swift counterattack on you, it will definitely come to your end rather than to your benefit. So I do suggest being a little bit cautious with that, but once more, play as you like. And chain order, or play order for effects. Chain resolves backwards, like in Yu-Gi-Oh! If you don't know what Yu-Gi-Oh! Chain order is, it is basically where, say for example, for all of you who know Yu-Gi-Oh! Terminology, If I were to use a card like Mirror Force onto a Solemn Judgment, onto another Solemn Judgment, then basically it would activate in reverse. So the first Solemn Judgment, the last Solemn Judgment, the one that was played last in the chain, would activate first, nullifying the first Solemn Judgment, and then the Mirror Force would go off because it's no longer affected by the Solemn Judgment. That's how Chain Resolve backwards work. So in this case, for example, if a card that would activate an on-place effect would be activated first, and a card that would activate on destruction effect would have been the second in the chain to resolve, then they would go in reverse order, so the on destruction effect would activate first, then the on place effect. That's how the chain works in this game. Those rarely come up, but it's still something you should be aware of just in case it does. And then we are on to gift checks and damage checks. These are very important aspects of the game. For a gift check, they mainly belong to level 2s and level 3s with a few level 1s sprinkled in here and there that can generate a gift if you pay 1. So basically, like the cost for a normal card, if you pay 1, as you can see, I'm going to bring in my friend Wizard of the Dark Arts Tiresias here. In the corner where you would normally see a shield icon on cards like Crimson Draco Kid, there is a little marking icon. That is called a gift. If it has that icon, that means it can perform a gift check when it attacks. And that's what it is. When your creature with that marker attacks, you may pay 1 to activate a gift check. And that's when you look at the top, that's when you check the top card of your deck and you reveal it to your opponent and it goes to your hand. If it is a trigger, you activate the trigger. So if it's a damage trigger, you deal 1 damage to your opponent. If it's a draw, you draw a card. And if it's a heal, you recover 1. And regardless of what it is, either if it's a trigger or not a trigger, it goes to your hand after you reveal it. And that's how gift check works. So they're very simple. They can get you a lot of help, and it's a way to get a hand card. As for damage checks, they are very similar in the sense that you do not pay 1 to do them. When your opponent were to deal you damage either by your creature being destroyed or by your opponent attacking you directly, what you do is you take the top of your deck like you would do if you were to do a gift check. Then you reveal it, and if it's a trigger, you activate it. And regardless if it is a trigger or not, what you do after it would activate, if it has an ability that would activate, you place it into your damage zone. That is all it is. It is very simple. Very niche game way activated. So that's the difference between damage check and gift checks. They're basically the same thing, just main difference is one will go to the hand, one will go to the damage zone. Very easy to understand. Now on to the importance of guarding. As I said earlier, all guards will have that shield icon on them and their power is added to their shield. So for triggers, they all have guarding values. So for heals, they have 150, as you can see by my heal trigger right here. Draws have 100, as you can see by the draw. And damage triggers over here have 50 shield or power, even though they're never going to be summoned to the field because you cannot summon them to the field. Level 1 creatures have a shield values equal to their power as represented by the shield. If they do not have a shield, then that means they cannot guard. That acquires to level 1s too. To guard, you have to wait for your opponent to attack you. So say, for example, Tiresias over here was to go into the rest position and attack my Crimson Draco Kid right now. So, to guard, you need to guard with cards from your hand and you put them into the Guardian Zone. And for the guard to be successful, they have to have power equal to or greater than the oncoming power. And when you are guarding for a creature, that creature's power is added to the guard as well. So Crimson Draco Kid right now has 100 power. Tiresias has 200. What you can do is you can put a draw trigger into the guard zone, and because 100 plus 100 equals 200, and that's even to Tiresias' 200 power, then automatically the attack is stopped, which is the simple way of guarding it. Or you could do a heal trigger. It does go over, and that's what's called overguarding in this game, where you guard more than you need to. But either way, it will still stop the attack, and a damage trigger on its own would not stop, but you need 2 damage triggers to stop it, and that would still work. Now, when you are attacked directly, on the other hand, you do not have power to begin with to guard, which means you have to use cards in total. So, for example, if Tiresias over here were to attack us directly, a heal trigger wouldn't be able to stop it because it's only 150 compared to 200. So you have to throw down a damage trigger as well, or 2 draws, or 4 damage triggers to be able to stop the attack. That is the basis of guarding. Now, on to attacking. As I said earlier, for you to attack, you must take your standing creature right here, and say, for example, Tiresias, and you rest it. And when your creature attacks an opponent, and you declare what you're attacking. If you're attacking an opponent, you say, I'm attacking so-and-so directly. If you're attacking a creature, for example, like Crimson Draco Kid, you say, I attack Crimson Draco Kid with Wizard of the Dark Arts Tiresias. Now, if there is excess power from the attack when your opponent would not guard, they take 1 damage. An example of this would be, say for example, Crimson Draco Kid and Tiresias over here. If they did not guard, and since Crimson Draco Kid has 100 power and Tiresias has 200 power, 200 is obviously bigger than 100. Your opponent will take damage equal to the number next to the power on the creature. So for example, on most cards, it will say 1. and so that means they will always take 1 damage. But on the occasions where a card will have 2 damage, like for example, Crimson Drake could give an ability to another card that allowed it to do 2 damage. If the attack went through, then they would take 2 damage, if there was excess power, that is. Now, what happens if 2 creatures of the same power attacked into each other? If 2 creatures of the same power attacked into each other, and neither player guarded, both creatures would be destroyed, and neither player would take damage. So this is a really nice way to, get rid of an opponent's pesky card, but also not lose something. And it also applies to you where if you attack your opponent's stronger creature with your weaker creature, if your creature is destroyed, you do still take damage. That is always going to be the case. The weaker creature that's destroyed, if there is a power difference, it will always result in the player whose creature was destroyed taking the damage. And now if your opponent has no creatures, you can attack them directly. They can still guard your attack and vice versa. So if you have no creatures, your opponent can also attack you directly. So that's always something to be aware of, like I said earlier with Tiresias, where he could either swing into Crimson Draco Kid, but if you do not have a creature like Crimson Draco Kid on your field, they can attack you directly. And then you have to guard without having extra power to add on to your shield. And as we've gone over, just to make sure that you guys get the gist of it, in the top left-hand corner, there is a number that represents this level, which is 1 up here for Crimson Draco Kid. For Tiresias, it's 2. On the top left, on the top right, there is a nation symbol. For Crimson Draco Kid, he belongs to the nation of Arizon. For Tiresias, he belongs to the nation of Drafir. And under that, there will always be either a shield icon or a gift icon, and that will represent if it either has a gift check or if it has guarding capabilities. And at the very bottom, and then towards the middle, there will always be its skill. At the very bottom, there will always be 2 numbers. The one that's most likely going to be a single-digit number and will most likely always be 1 is the amount of damage it will do in a direct attack scenario, or in the scenario where it destroys an opponent's creature and they were to take a damage. And the number on the right to that is going to be the number of power that it has. So for Tiresias, it's 200. For Crimson Draco Kid, it's 100. And if your creature is attacked and you guard it with a creature, that creature is sent to the drop zone. The creature that was used to guard is sent to the drop zone at the end of the battle, and that is the same for every guard. So if you were to guard the heal trigger at the end of that battle, it will go to drop zone regardless if the attack failed to hit or not. And now onto spell traps and runes because they have their own specifics to them. So just like the creatures, in the top left-hand corner, and also with the triggers I forgot to mention, but also in the top left-hand corner for them, right-hand corner, is the nation that they're from. So for our cards right here, we have Unfair Deal, which is from Drafir, and we have Fire Blast and Strength of Arizon, which are both from Arizon. So spells can only be played during your turn unless they're specified. There are certain spells that allow them to be played during your opponent's turn, and typically they activate whenever they can. Now, most spells only activate during the main phase, but if it is something that specifies it activates during the battle phase, then activates during the battle phase, and etc. Traps can only be played from the hand, and you can use them at any time as long as you can pay the cost. So, for example, for Fire Blast right here, it says when your opponent plays a spell or trap, they take 1 damage. Regardless of when they play a spell or trap, if they play a spell or trap during your turn, you may use Fire Blast if you can pay the 2 cost. If they use it during your end phase, as long as you can pay the 2 cost, they take a damage. If they use it during their turn, you're going to pay the 2 cost, you can deal them a damage. That's how it works. And runes, they stay on the field until their maintenance cost can be paid. The maintenance cost is optional, and sometimes runes do not have a place cost. So for example, Strength of Arizon here, it does not have a place cost, and it does not have a maintenance cost. A maintenance cost would say, for example, pay 1 and discard 1 at the start of your turn, and if you do not do that, then this rune is placed into your drop zone. So that's what a maintenance cost is. It's basically either you pay the cost or it goes away. But for some runes like Strength of Arizon, they do not have a maintenance cost or an on-place cost. They only have an ability cost, which in this case is pay 1. All of your creatures get plus 50 power until the end of turn. So that is the logistics of runes. They stay on the field as long as they can. Traps activate whenever your opponent occurs something or like does something that interferes with you. And spells can be played whenever during your turn. Whenever during your main phase, unless specified, they can do it at another time. And that, my friends, is the general rules of Thera. All around, I have genuinely test played Thera a lot in my time of just... Because I've been... None of you may know this, but I have been a part of Thera the Thera development group for a long time now. I think I joined the group about a year ago, or like slightly over a year ago, and I've genuinely enjoyed every moment of it. Like, I have been the main test player and the main maker for a lot of the cards. Not trial deck cards, but a lot of cards after the trial deck. I have genuinely made a lot of them, and I have enjoyed every one of them. Like, I've enjoyed making cards. It's given me a perspective on a lot of things. I have enjoyed uploading. I've enjoyed test playing a lot of games on Thera, and all around, I do think it's a genuinely fun game, and I do think you should try it out. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope it was very informational for all of you trying to learn Thera, and thank you for checking it out, and we will see you all in our next Thera-based video. See ya.